Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Fist on Chin show on the Chaotic Sports Network. My name is Chris Arda. To my left or right or wherever he is Afshin Hayat. We are going to talk about UFC 258, mostly the main event, because as we said in the preview show, it was a little bit top heavy UFC card. A lot of risks going on there, putting a fight that's been canceled a couple times on top of that card, which didn't have another fight that couldn't even really headline a UFC fight night. But anyway, it was still, I think, overall a very good card. I was entertained by it. I was happy to see Kevin Gastelum back on. We saw two great surprising submissions. One of them being a 30-1 betting prop that we'd see Hernandez get a submission against Vieira. But the big story is Gilbert Burns or Kamaru Usman, the champion, versus Gilbert Burns, the deserving, as we figured out on Wednesday in the preview show, the actually very deserving number one contender just from what's gone on in the world last year. And what I found to be even a bigger thread that we only touched on a little bit on Wednesday was their friendship. Before we get into that, though, one of the milestones that the UFC kept hounding on us was Kamaru Usman's now 13-fight winning streak in the welterweight division, beating Georges St-Pierre. And the truth is, if you beat Georges St-Pierre at anything, a guy with a claim at the greatest of all time, level. If you beat him on anything, especially in welterweight where he fought his whole career, then that's a big deal, I think. But how big of a deal is it really? 13 fights in a row, beating Georges St-Pierre. But it's not title fights, and I think that if you say that enough, my friend that's a bigger football fan or someone just watching passively, I think they might just start thinking that it's title fights, right? But Georges St-Pierre record's a little bit different, right?
That's true. Of St-Pierre's 12-fight winning streak, 11 of those fights, it turns out, were title fights. The rebound fight after the Sarah loss was a 3-round non-title fight victory. Kamaru Usman's 13-fight streak, which is essentially his entire rise in the organization through his title-winning performance against Woodley a couple fights ago, is 4 fights of title fights within that 13-fight streak. Nonetheless, still very impressive, still active, and still with room to grow some more. Great performance last night by Usman.
Yeah, beautiful performance. Actually, technically GSP's is still active, right?
I mean, he's not the champion, but I guess it's still active if he fights.
His welterweight winning streak is still active technically.
I think you know what I mean, though.
No, I know what you mean. I mean, when you said it's not active, it's because GSP is not active, right? But if he waltzed in there and decided to start fighting at welterweight again, I mean, he would get to add to it, right? But obviously, we don't think that's going to happen. We talked GSP last time. Kamaru Usman right now is the man. Now, I wanted to point out something interesting. I got a text from a friend that wasn't able to catch the first round of the fight, right? And he came in on the second round where Usman looked super dominant, and his text said something like, "Usman's right at the level of Khabib, and he is just dominant. He just beat up on Gilbert Burns, et cetera, et cetera." Now, you and I saw that first round. We saw that Gilbert Burns came out strong. But how do you compare with what Usman's been able to do, mostly dominant, to be honest, to Khabib's dominance, where maybe we saw a little touchiness with Al Iaquinta that was a little bit weird, maybe a hiccup. How would you compare that dominant streak between the two of them?
Sure, that's an interesting point. On the surface, I'm not really a big fan of it, but I can actually kind of see how it makes sense because you have two guys who are basically undefeated in the UFC, dominant fighters, dominant champions. But I would say that, and also they don't really lose rounds much. I think that they said that Khabib lost 2, maybe 3 rounds unanimously in his career.
Yeah.
I think that was McGregor, and then the opening round with Gaethje, which a lot of people thought Khabib's strong finish to that round won him the round. So it's arguable only one.
I did.
Okay, got it. And going into this fight, I would say Usman had lost a couple of rounds in his career, but only one of them apparently was unanimous, and that was against Colby Covington now 3 fights ago. Although I would argue it was 2-2 going into the 5th round there. So, yeah, he's pretty dominant, and he doesn't lose rounds much. I would argue he lost the first round last night based on the punishment he took and the frequency of big shots he took, although he outlanded Burns in the first round as well. But I would say that the danger, in these close fights or even in fights where someone's kind of chipping away at someone or causing some damage, if they take a near knockdown or a big shot, I mean, that can change the trajectory of how it's scored. So I don't know. What do you think? So
I think, this comparative stuff is more an exercise just to see what we can see on each side, right? I think Khabib, I mean, did he lose rounds? Maybe, but he every time he fought, he looked like he was growing exponentially. And that's not to take away from Usman, who's become this great striker, it seems like, at points. He could switch to not being a wrestler against Colby Covington and beat him up. With punches, and the same with Gilbert Burns, So, the only reason I brought it up, I just thought it was an interesting contrast, because he texted me coming in, wherever he was, whatever he was doing, he came in on the 2nd round. And if you come in on the 2nd round, it looks like a different fight, because Gilbert Burns came out to win, especially in that 1st round. And I think some of the talk afterwards that Usman said, especially in the post fight with Joe Rogan, how much do you think? And I'll tell you what he said in a second in case you missed that. But how much do you think came in? How much do you think the friendship played in here? Because what he said to Joe Rogan was, I'm paraphrasing, but he goes, he's sort of my friend. He was really excited. And he goes, when he stinged me, when he buzzed me in that 1st round, he goes, that's when I felt like this guy's coming to take my belt away. He's coming to take money from my family. He didn't say that, but that's a common thing people say, it buzzed him. And not only did it almost knock him out, it made him realize that he needs to start, being active. And I'm not sure if that's what happened. I think Gilbert Burns just came out as a fast starter kind of thing. But in Usman's mind, this was a friendship thing, and the switch, he flipped that switch when he felt Gilbert Burns' power. Yeah, you're right about that. So there's a couple interesting things that Usman said. First of all, they trained together for 6 years, and if you look at any of the footage which is widely available, there's more of that footage available than I actually have time to view. That's how much there is out there. He said, look, we trained together a lot. We did a lot of rounds. The rumor was like 200 rounds together over the years. So that's a lot of footage together. And anyone who's done sports with anyone in a team setting or together with someone over a period of time, you build up a camaraderie. When you spill blood, sweat, and tears with somebody, that is sort of like a bond that is a little bit difficult to acquire elsewhere. He said, one of the things that he liked about being champion was that he could put, this is Usman talking, could put his daughter in any school he wanted. And Burns came and poked a little bit at that, saying like he wanted to send his daughter to the school of his choice. And then Usman took that very personally. Ultimately, he shared that it was pretty tough to face a teammate, but he had to go in there and, drop the face and drop the name and treat it like someone who's trying to take what he's worked for. And ultimately, although he got buzzed pretty quick, he survived it. He adjusted his game plan and he came back strong. And it was a very impressive performance. So we can actually link this previous Khabib talk with a little bit of what happened technically in the fight. So Khabib maybe lost a round here or there, but he's just looked super dominant, especially his last couple fights, right? Yeah. Usman is a little bit different. I mean, he is a super dominant champion, deserves to be way up on the pound for pound rankings. But I think in a different way is that he actually had some real, he had to come back from that first round. I mean, he got buzzed
very scary.
Yeah. So in the context of digging deep and becoming a champion, Usman actually was in a bad situation, near a knockout, and then was able to find it in him to come back. Now, how much of that is Usman heart of a champion? I know we're on more of an emotional situation here. Usman heart of a champion, and how much of that was Gilbert Burns, being a little bit careful because he buzzed him a couple times, but there were moments where I felt like Gilbert Burns was also being safe. He was also trying not to get caught. That maybe he could have put on a little bit more in that first round.
Definitely.
Do you think that's the case?
I see a little bit of that. What I saw was, my prediction was that Usman was going to put his weight on Burns and show who the bigger man was and wear him down that way. And I was expecting it to go to decision with Usman winning fairly dominantly after surviving some harrowing moments. The latter part of that is true, but ultimately, what I saw with Burns was he came out to blitz and to blitz Usman, and Usman actually said that's how our sparring used to go. I'd start off and he'd drill me, and he would go like he'd throw with real power. And in
Burns's defense, it was a blitz, but it still looked pretty technical to me.
Yeah, no, what I mean by blitz is you try to take him out early and use your power. But definitely, he's a technical striker, although he relies heavily on power. But what I saw a little bit was after that didn't work, it looked like the weight of the moment and the magnitude of what he was doing got to him a little bit. I think that because Burns looked to be getting a little bit flustered, a little bit tired, and that doesn't usually happen to him. I mean, he was walking in there with like a 9-3 record in the UFC. It's 18-3 record in MMA or something like that. So
so the weight of the moment, but also the weight of a jab that feels like a straight right. So let's go into that.
Sure.
In the second round, the jab started working, right?
Jab from both sides. Did you notice that he was throwing an orthodox jab, and then he would throw the jab from southpaw? Mm-hmm. And at that point, when you're fighting orthodox and you're going against a person who's jabbing at you, if you can cut the angle to throw your overhand right inside, sure, that's one way to do it. You can also slip the jab outside and land that overhead because the entire face of the guy's body is open. But at that point, I think that Burns, he was sinking into quicksand at that point, and he looked to be more flustered than anything. He had no counters for it, and if he did, it was one punch at a time.
I think that was the game plan, though, is to come up with the overhand right or the overhand. And he started doing the jab too, and it worked. It hit a couple times, but I think that's the story of the reach. Usman threw that jab out there, and those overhands early in the second round didn't always connect.
76-inch reach on a 6'2" guy.
Yeah, and then it just started. I mean, then those jabs just started doing work. So I think my mindset. And after thinking about it too, watching the fight between round 1 and 2, my mindset changed a little bit. Because I did think that he in the first round, once Gilbert Burns touched Usman and clearly hurt him, and it was more than once. Usman said he stung me once, but it was more than once in that round, and it was also once, I think, after they were on the ground and Usman was working the leg. I think Gilbert Burns got him again.
Yeah.
But when I just said when I was watching that round, I was like, oh man, Gilbert, you gotta lay it on him a little more. He's hurt. You know what I mean? Cut off. You got to throw a little bit more.
Yeah.
But then when I compare that, but I think there was a respect level there, and not friendship respect. I think I know what he can do respect, because Usman somewhat did the same thing, right? Usman stayed behind that jab. Gilbert Burns was clearly hurt. And neither one got so flustered where they went for the finish too quickly. Because there were times in the second round where I thought Usman should also just, he buzzed him. He needs to go and finish it, kind of thing. But it looked like it was the striking was two guys that know each other well. We're going to mostly stay up, and they're going to respect each other's power, because they really just, at the end of the day, Usman found the thing that worked and worked it until he got the finish, I thought.
So let me ask you a question, because that brings up a very interesting point. You hear a lot of times in fighting where people say, don't chase the knockout, let the knockout come, right?
Exactly.
And it seemed that both fighters went that route. But at the same time, between competition and training, you and I have a lot of experience compared to the average fan.
Well,
what do you think about? Well, nonetheless, you've been in the training room a lot, so don't discount yourself. But what I'm saying though is that sometimes whether you're doing jits or whether you're doing sparring, you still have to take the opportunity if it's there. And so it's one of those catch-22 questions. I had him hurt. Should I have sat back? Because it didn't work out for me, or in some cases, you see some people blow their wads, which we'll be talking about another fighter who did that in the jiu-jitsu realm earlier. Mm-hmm. Chasing it too hard, and then everything falls apart from there. So ultimately, do you think Burns would have caught, or do you think he would have finished Usman had he been more aggressive and less cautious after he clipped him?
Yeah, I don't. I think if we want to get into the hypothetical round, I think that if Gilbert Burns could get this fight again and be completely healthy, but see the fight that happened, what would he need to do, to sort of fix this? And at the end of the day, I think, Usman was just behind a really powerful jab on both sides, like you said. And it looked like the game plan to me was to counter that with the overhand, mostly the overhand right.
It's true. That's the luck he's had.
And it didn't work. And it didn't work because that arm is too long and that jab was too powerful.
And it appears Usman has a good chin. I haven't seen him take like a real flush one, but these were like grazing shots, which were having some impact. But he took them and he stayed composed. I mean, if there's something he has, if you want to talk about similarities he has with Khabib, it's that he won't be thrown off his game plan. He's going to stay composed, and that intimidates and breaks fighters when they see that they gave this guy something good, and he's like, okay, yeah, well, I expected that. So now you're gonna have to take it from me because I'm not going out. I'm not getting out of here that easily. So
yeah, that's exactly what happened too. I think that if you needed to write a sentence about this fight, or about Usman in this fight, it's exactly what you said.
Yeah.
The only thing I will say real quick, is I think just looking at Gilbert Burns' other knockouts that they looked grazing. I think those weren't grazing. I think those punches knock out, most of the other welterweights on that list. Yeah, I think that chin. And I only say that because I'm thinking about Gilbert Burns' other knockouts.
Go back and look and see where the connection was, because there's a couple spots that are like money spots to hit someone right on the chin, temple, behind the ear.
Yeah, right there.
Is that where he caught Usman when Usman both of his hands went on the ground? Did he catch him behind the ear, or was it on the top of the head?
We'll have to relook at that. I thought it was top of the head. I mean, we keep. I mean, not you and I, but the storyline is that Usman got caught once. I mean, he got caught a lot in the first round. I think he got caught a lot, But as you know, that like if we watched the knockout Conor had on who did he just fight? But the knockout that he had against him on Dustin Poirier. So we watched the Conor knockout on Dustin Poirier from a few years back. That doesn't look like it touched Poirier at all either. You know what I mean? So
it was grazing, but it was in a bad spot.
It was in the bad spot, yeah. So I think a lot of those punches, I think actually Gilbert Burns, and Usman said this too, it makes him look better to say it, but I think Gilbert Burns actually wins on connects with a lot of top welterweights even, and he wins that. So I mean, Gilbert Burns is going to be a fun guy, to see how he bounces back. He said he wants to come back right away. Yeah, that's going to be a fun thing. Now, do you have something else about the technical side or what happened in the fight?
The only thing I would share is that I found it very interesting when Usman came out southpaw. I hadn't really seen him do that effectively in the past, and he had, he's with Trevor Whitman now, but that's who he was with originally. But he had his two. He was credited with 2 knockdowns, and each from a jab, and each from different stances. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Shows he's got some power.
Yeah, learning, continually growing.
I wanted to see new stuff in this fight. I saw some new stuff from each guy. I kind of wanted to see what I meant by that was I wanted to see if Usman could take damage and come back, and he did. And then I also wanted to see if he had some new wrinkles in his game. He was even throwing kicks, which was impressive. If I were Burns, I would have been more. I just would have been more aggressive because the guy didn't want to go to the ground with him. Usman didn't want to go to the ground with him, and I would have crowded Usman's space a little bit more because what's the worst thing that happens? It gets taken down. The only thing I thought that was strange was that if you remember when Burns was on his back and Usman was kicking his legs, it looked like he landed like 20 kicks. I mean, why did Burns sit there and take that? Because you take a few of those and it looks bad, or it looks bad, but it's not. But then his facial expression changed, and he was like, "All right, I'm kind of stuck here, and Herb Dean's letting this go for like 30, 40 seconds, and I've taken like 10 shots." So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, well, on that, and we'll get to what's next for both of them in a second. But on that, though, I mean, Herb Dean did the right thing. Like,
I want to see that position more. I want to make them work from there.
Well, most of the time, it was going to be Usman's choice, and Usman was kicking and he was working, and Gilbert Burns just couldn't get up because he tried a couple times and he was about to take a big punch at the top of his head. So they were just stuck. You know what I mean? I like that. I like that. To be honest, I like that Usman, after getting buzzed, he had just gotten buzzed, right? I like that Usman was able to get his mind back in it. Who knows what would have happened if they weren't in that position, or if Usman let him stand back up. But everything, I thought that was done perfectly. Gilbert Burns found himself in a bad spot. Herb Dean let them work because Usman was throwing strikes. He was kicking them.
He was.
And it's Gilbert Burns' responsibility to figure that out. I don't think there's very many other people that Kamaru Usman doesn't just get right on top of in the welterweight division in that situation. But, it didn't happen. So let's transition to what happens now.
Sure.
I was actually very surprised at Usman's call out. It's probably a money fight, but hey, it works as well as anything else.
What do you think? Do you want to see it again?
Of Masvidal? I mean, I'm hoping to see any of those guys fight. I mean, that's 2 questions for me, Afshin. One is like my philosophy on immediate rematches, and then the other one is what's actually going to happen, right? So to me, when I watch basketball or football or baseball, these teams play each other a bunch of times. You know what I mean? I'm not anti, if Kobe Covington's the best guy there, or if Jorge Masvidal is the most interesting fight, like I personally don't mind them running it back very quickly. With that said, that just doesn't happen. So I have to consider that when we're like talking about what's next kind of thing,
Right.
I mean, what are your thoughts? Why would he call out Masvidal of all people? What are your thoughts on that? And do you want to see it?
I'll start it off with I'm a fan of both guys. Kamaru Usman, I wasn't always a fan of. He's turned me into a fan, and growing with each fight. I'm a big fan of Jorge Masvidal. In fact, I was a big fan of Jorge Masvidal even before he entered the UFC when he was in Strikeforce, because I knew he was a technical guy. And his early UFC career, he kind of has 2 chapters to his UFC career, before 2019 and post 2019. And if you actually look at his record, it's scattered with split decision losses. And so his career trajectory could have been totally different had judges been swayed or seen something a little bit different. Nonetheless, I don't really want to see this fight. I just saw it last year. It was short notice, but I feel that option for Usman to win that fight is always going to be there in that way, especially as Masvidal, who's a little bit undersized for the division, gets older. It's harder to wrestle. And Usman said, well, the reason why I took the fight on 6 days notice, because we were trying to put it together earlier last year. The reason why I took it on last minute notice was because he had a built-in excuse. Okay, yeah, maybe so. I don't doubt it, especially if he's saying that. And Masvidal has pointed out, look how well I did on, and we were talking about it, that he actually looked pretty decent in terms of takedown defense and things like that in the Usman fight. I don't really want to see that. I'd rather see Jorge Masvidal versus Colby.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure at this moment who I want to see Usman fight next, but there are several compelling matchups in the top 10 for him.
So that's the problem, is those compelling matchups are are at least a money fight.
Sure.
With Masvidal, that's at least a fight that's going to get some marketing behind it.
Yep.
We all want to see Leon Edwards and Stephen Thompson get one more fight. Like,
Yep.
I think we both agree they both need that. You know, he beat Colby Covington recently, and you're matching up Colby and Masvidal, right? Obviously,
that's the direction they're trying to move. So that's
Yeah.
kind of go that way. Plus,
Well,
they're both two recent victories for Usman. I'd rather let anticipation build a little bit more.
yeah, well, Usman may have changed that with his call out of Masvidal, right?
That's,
and I mean,
yeah,
and,
that's totally
and
fair.
Masvidal, and until Masvidal lost, I mean, he was, you know,
The hottest thing.
the hottest thing, right? And now he's gotten a little bit quiet. I think he needed a hand surgery too, to be honest. If I remember correctly, I might be getting my timing missed there. But
Yep.
There's nothing else for Leon.
You're actually
Edwards.
totally right. I'm looking at the rankings. I'm looking at the rankings. I'm in MMA Junkie right now. It's either rematches or you have to go to like the back half of the top 10 to your Stephen Thompsons of the world, Michael Chiesa's, Vicente Luque's, Jeff Neal.
None of those are going to happen, right?
None of those are happening right now.
So
until makes a statement.
Yeah, the two that are going to happen, and there's plenty of holes wrong with these fights, are either the Masvidal fight, right, or Leon Edwards, which is Leon Edwards is one of the hottest guys in the division. If we just skip all of 2020, you know, if we
go rewind to summer 2019.
Yeah, you know what I mean. But like he was
streak-wise.
Yeah, it's not his fault. You know, everyone was excited about Leon Edwards. You know, and that's really the problem, is that you got great fights. You know, it's just we've seen them in some way or some fashion. You've got good fights championed through number 5 in UFC's rankings, right? So I think that they put, and this is unfortunate because I want to see this fight, but I think they might put Colby and Masvidal on ice a little bit. And give Masvidal another fight, and you know what I mean. And Masvidal now is his own. You know, they don't have to spend that much in marketing because Masvidal is going to market the fight on his own. He figured that out. That's one of the things he figured out, by the way. When you cut his, and they also figure out how to market him, by the way. But when you cut his career in half there, so there's no great choice.
No,
right?
There isn't. If Jeff Neal had beaten Stephen Thompson, like we talked about, or maybe if had he won that fight, then you'd probably, especially if it had been, fairly dominant, he'd probably be the guy right now. Right now, they're not going to give it to Stephen Thompson. He'll have to win another one, and he'll probably need a finish or a dominant victory. And the other guys in the top 10 aren't in the organization. So,
yeah. So, I think that, and I think what you just said too, right? You said that the Masvidal and Usman fight is always there. You know, you could say the same thing about Masvidal and Colby. Like that fight is actually always there. You know, and you know that'll turn on. I mean, both big Trump supporters. You know, so
can't we eliminate one of them just for that reason? Shouldn't they fight each other?
That's the best part. That's the best part, is that Colby. Colby's just spinning that because that's his like shtick, right? That become the bad guy kind of thing. But I mean, I think Masvidal actually is like deeply in his head a Trump supporter, and Colby at any time he could just do the face turn like in WWE, and just start being something else, But so that's pretty funny to me too. But they're not best friends anymore. They're not good friends anymore. There's no wrestling in the apartment front room like we.
No room for friendship in the welterweight top 5.
No, not at all. And I think that fight can happen anytime. I'm going to guess. I'm just going to take a wild guess and say that that UFC is going to go down that route. But the good news is that they don't have to like sign this fight immediately, right? You can try to get Leon Edwards to get a fight in. Leon Edwards gets his fight in, which I think it was just canceled, right? Again,
just canceled this week.
Yeah, and if he gets a fight in and lays a guy out, then that's probably the fight. If that happens in the next 2 months. because Usman probably doesn't fight again until November or something like that, So, they might give it to Leon Edwards, and I would like to see Leon Edwards fight a little bit more, a little bit, higher ranking guys, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
How about on the other side? What is Gilbert Burns? I think I wouldn't be surprised if we see Gilbert Burns immediately after the 60 days or whatever the fight.
Yeah. The suspension or so. Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't see if we see Gilbert Burns really, really quick, but what do you think about Gilbert Burns' next fight?
So there's something interesting that in the business of fighting they tend to do, especially in the business of MMA. When you come off of a title loss, the most logical thing to do is whoever beats the person who lost in the title fight gets the next title shot. So although they don't have a exact contender, that's kind of Usman sort of did the business work for the matchmakers. I would say that maybe they have Leon Edwards sit and fight Burns in 2 months. Maybe whoever is right there on the cusp but needs a win, maybe that's who rebounds off of Burns. So that could even be a Jeff Neal. That could be a Vicente Luque if he gets past Woodley. I think he's fighting Woodley in the next couple weeks. And Luque not only is super durable, but likes to fight several times a year. He has multiple calendar years where he fought like 3-4 times.
Yeah. So, well, Gilbert Burns too, listen, that's the logical thing to do would be put him against Leon Edwards if the timing works out right.
Yeah.
But I find just as often UFC doesn't destroy their next matchup, right? Because Gilbert Burns beats Leon Edwards, and then now you're in a situation for Usman kind of thing, and that's the pay-per-view thing. I think what you just said is more along the track of who he might get, like a Jeff Neal or a Vicente Luque, who I'm not sure if it's scheduled yet. Whenever a guy loses like that and gets finished, and there's no talk of a rematch, I'm always looking for him. I'm always looking for that guy to fight the Chimaev, which is actually what we might see if Leon Edwards gets another fight.
That's a great point. That totally could happen.
Yeah. So or Luque.
Scary matchup for Chimaev.
Yeah, it is, and it's also great for Chimaev. It's how you let someone jump 7 spots.
Yeah, I mean, with high risk comes high reward. So you're right about that. That would be interesting, and that's much better timing. Vicente Luque is booked to fight Woodley. Jeff Neal doesn't have anything at the moment, so that I could see that. But honestly, dark horse Chimaev, he's going to need a fight, and they're moving on. Leon Edwards is getting someone else, they said. So I think you're right about that.
Yeah. Do you think that's fair to Chimaev, though? I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but Chimaev, so what's wrong with Chimaev isn't that he got COVID again. It's that he's feeling the post lung stuff is my understanding of it. So it's not like he didn't recontract it. He's actually
suffering from its after effects. Yeah.
He's one of the after effects guys, and I believe it. I don't believe if any of those Dagestan fighters tell me that they can't fight, I believe them. You know what I mean?
Because they're the toughest guys. They're the toughest guys. So if he says he's feeling it, he's feeling it.
They have that mindset, you know what I mean? And and we also saw Chimaev fight, twice in a week for the UFC and Fight Island. So, everything I know about him, which isn't a ton, he came, out of nowhere in 2020, is that this is a real thing. Now, is it fair to put up a guy like that, to put him up against Gilbert Burns? You know what I mean? Because if he feels it, he's going to say yes, but that's sort of effed up in my head,
Well, I'll tell you, it's all about timing, and if they want him to have his best shot at beating Burns, it's coming off of a TKO loss with a quick turnaround. So ultimately, I wouldn't give him that matchup because Burns has so many ways to win. Yeah. Leon Edwards has ways to win too, but he's in a one-punch KO power dude, and he doesn't have the threat of jiu-jitsu, although he's a pretty good wrestler, especially for a British guy. And he was also coming off a major layoff. So they're doing their best to give Chimaev what seem to be favorable matchups against dangerous guys.
Yeah. Do you think tell me if it's a good fight and whether you think there's any chance it happens, but Gilbert Burns and Wonderboy? It's off a win and off a loss is the problem. But
if they give that fight to Burns, Sorry, if they put that together, I think the idea is for Burns to bounce back off a very credible name. Because I don't know if that's the fight that would give Stephen Thompson the title shot. I'm not sure what gives him the title shot. I just think he should get a title shot.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I mean, he's coming off a main event win for 4 rounds. It was pretty dominant until he injured himself in the 5th. What else does the guy have to do to get a title shot? Plus, it's 38. Every once in a while, you got to have an older dude get a title shot so your older fans can feel good.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you there. I don't think that it's likely that he just gets a title shot, right? I think he does need a win off of Burns, something like that. I think Burns has a similar. I think Gilbert Burns has a similar problem though that he had that we saw against Usman, is that there's a reach and distance is the problem. Do you think Burns can get that to the ground, or is
Wonderboy?
Yeah, or Stephen Thompson too smart? It's going to stay too far away for it to ever really get to the ground.
Man, like you said, when you fight Stephen Thompson, all of a sudden the range is like an extra foot wider. And I think that one of the things that we kind of saw in this fight was Burns looking a little bit smaller, not in so much size-wise, although he did a little bit, but because he just couldn't get close. The jab really dictated the range. Well, if this guy dictated the range with his jab, well, you also have Thompson, who does side kicks and front kicks as jabs as well. So the range will be even farther. It's not a great matchup for him. He can get it to the ground, but he's going to have to kind of bull rush. And it's all about timing in that fight for Burns.
So I think for Stephen Thompson to have a chance at getting a title shot, his best bet as far as name and people knowing his is Jorge Masvidal, but Masvidal has 3 better fights for him ahead of him. Colby, Leon, and Usman, obviously. So that's out of it. Stephen Thompson and Leon Edwards is possible. They're both
would love it.
That people avoid.
I would love it. Leon Edwards did not want that fight last year. Before, right in like the summer when Thompson's fight with Jeff Neal fell apart because Neal was in the hospital with lung stuff. Stephen Thompson said, "How about me and Leon Edwards?" And Edwards was like, "Not to be rude, but you've lost multiple fights lately. Hell no." And he made it seem like it was simply based on rankings and simply based on the guy's recent history. Now I think Leon Edwards is like, anyone who's willing to fight me, I'll take it. I think his mindset has changed
at this point. So that could happen, right? But I think Stephen Thompson's best path, if he's looking to be looking for that another championship shot, is going to be through Gilbert Burns. I don't know if the UFC puts that together. Gilbert Burns doesn't seem someone that would back away from it, especially if he gets to do his quick turnaround kind of thing. But hey, there are fights there. We just have a couple people that need a couple more wins, here and there, or that need to win again because they were recently beaten by Usman. The only disappointing thing is, to me, on this list, is that aside from Chimaev, it's all people that are, it's all like Neil Magny's in my head that are, Jeff Neal's the same way, Vicente Luque is the same way, guys that I'm not sure if they're top 5 guys in the future, and then everyone else is old. How about
Chiesa? I think he's 31.
Yeah, I mean, Chiesa's good, but I think he's that kind of guy that's just going to be, someone in the top, one of these guys in the top 5 right now are just going to be floating top 5s soon, right? They're just going to have taken too much losses to the other guys in there. But they're going to, you know what I mean? Where
they can beat the rest of the division. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just going to float there. That was happening in middleweight for a long time. You had a couple guys that, they just were just sitting there in the top 5. They were better than the rest of the, the top 15. But they just kept getting beat by, 1 through 3 or something like that.
That's Weidman as an example.
Yeah, Weidman is the exact example. That's exactly right. But I think that's what Chiesa will end up being, But with that said, Chiesa takes your back. You're going to get all these guys will get choked down. Every one of them.
I say give him the chance because he's fresh blood. If for no other reason than they need fresh blood. I mean, Usman is now starting to pile up victories over the top 5, top 10. So
what Chiesa
new
definitely
people.
get the chance. Yeah, if Chiesa gets another win here or there, I mean, he'll definitely get the chance. You know what I mean? I just don't see Chiesa as, and I'm a Chiesa fan. I like Chiesa. I like watching him. He's like a Kelvin Gastelum. You know, he's a guy that's always welcome on my TV. And I think that's a good transition. We're at 40. I do want to talk about 2 more fights at least on here.
Yeah, go for it.
It's so fun to talk about these welterweights, you know, and what's happening there and where they're stuck and stuff. And it looks like we're going to take a break from the welterweight division for a little bit because there's not going to be a championship fight for a while. Kelvin Gastelum. Now we both agreed he needed this win. Like, you know, he absolutely needed it. We knew he was in a dangerous fight, but he won this. He won this like a journeyman, you know?
Yeah, very much workman-like performance. I think we've seen Heinish's ceiling, man. I think we've seen his ceiling. I wasn't sure about it before this fight. I think we've kind of just seen it now. He hasn't had a stoppage in the UFC. This was a chance for him. He had Kelvin's back once or twice, especially in like the opening 30 seconds in that kind of all fours position where you kind of have seatbelt control. Couldn't really establish it. And then Kelvin just had more tools, and he had more, although his hands didn't look good, and but he had more tools, and boy, did he use his wrestling. We were talking about that. He used his wrestling and then some. Impressive workman-like performance for Kelvin, kind of showing that he will always beat the Ian Heinishes of the world, but it didn't help me feel super confident about his place in the middleweight division. I'd like to see his timing come back on his striking, but it showed that he's a multi-dimensional threat again and reminded people of that. So that was at least good. Still a top like 6'7" guy Gastelum is in middleweight.
Yeah, I think it's there. I think he needed this fight. You know, I think he needed to see, you know, him not dominate maybe a guy who I think you're on it at least, that maybe we've seen his ceiling. I think Kelvin Gastelum still needs to prove something to us to get us in that mindset of what he was against Israel Adesanya, like where Israel Adesanya had to find that, you know, what we just said about Usman at a way higher level. He had to dig deep. That's a classic moment that I think we need to go find, is where Israel Adesanya, I guess, tells him that he'll die here. Like Israel Adesanya had to find that, and we need to find that Kelvin Gastelum again. I just
know what it takes.
I don't know why it would go away, except that he's partying or he's not focused on his, you know, his training. He said that he took a brand new focus now. So now we need to go see that heart again. You know, I think that we're going to continually see him, you know, I don't know what he's going to do, bumble back and forth between welterweight, middleweight kind of thing. We know where he's going.
They said it on the pay-per-view. Sorry to interrupt. They said on the pay-per-view that he belongs at welterweight.
100% he does. But if he's, you know, if he starts getting into that situation where the reason he left welterweight was because he was missing weight and ruining fights, you know, then is he going to try to go back to middleweight? You know, he had a great showing against one of the pound for pound best fighters in the division. So I don't know. Like Kelvin Gastelum is still a mystery to me, because if like you said, what we saw from Heinisch is that we saw a ceiling, then Kelvin Gastelum didn't really look that impressive. He looked like a journeyman. He looked like he figured out a way to win. But who's he going to beat? You know, people below him?
I don't know if I agree with the assessment that he looked like a journeyman. I agree with it looking workmanlike. What I think we need to see at a Kelvin is that we've talked about it. He has like 2 major combinations that he throws. I shouldn't even say combinations. 2 major things he's known for in standing. One is the right hook, left straight, and one is the like left straight feint, and then he bobs back and then throws it. It's done really fast. But he's not showing anything else. And if he doesn't have that, then his striking will become less effective over time. And last night, I didn't really see him come close with any striking. I mean, throw low kicks into your game, something. You know, he's super strong, and because his center of gravity is so low, it's going to be tougher for the odd person, the non-wrestling specialist, to take him down. So I'd like to see him have a little bit less fear there. I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know how he's going to get to the top.
Is he going to welterweight after this, or is he going to stay in middleweight?
No, there's no talk about it on his end. It's completely a dedication issue on his end. I mean, I get it. I get it. The average person fighting at 185, it's hard to make 170. I think for him should be easier, but it's a dedication issue. I know he said that he likes to fatten up. I think he said that post-fight between fights. And if you can't tell by his physique, he carries a decent amount of fat anyway. So that guy goes to 200 pounds probably between fights. That's just the reality of it.
So who's he going to fight next? Uriah Hall, Derek Brunson? Do those guys have fights?
Maybe a rematch with Chris Weidman. Derek Brunson, Uriah Hall was supposed to fight Chris Weidman. That fight fell off.
Yeah.
And I think they may try to do that one again because they've always wanted Uriah Hall to get to the top, and he's riding some momentum. Kelvin said that he wanted to be the standby for the Robert Whittaker versus Paulo Costa fight. If one of them drops off, he wanted to jump in there. So it sounds like he's willing to dedicate himself to training at 185 and be ready on short notice. I don't like that matchup for him. I don't like either guy, especially Costa. I don't like him fighting Paulo Costa.
Maybe clean down and then maybe take a KO loss. Okay, Kelvin Gastelum. I think we're just agreed. We need to see a little bit more from Kelvin Gastelum, and there's actually a few. When I'm looking at the rankings, there's actually a few fights there for him. So he has a few. How about you tell me,
sure,
how much money you won on the submission victory, the submission victory of the year? Not because it was like a twister or something, but because it was Anthony Hernandez doing it to Rodolfo Vieira.
Wow.
You win some 30-1 money? Did you win $3,000?
I was not silly enough to put money on that. A guy who's been submitted twice in the UFC and multiple times in his professional amateur career against a guy with like 8 of 9 victories submissions. I mean, I wish I had.
The stat I heard is that Vieira has never actually been submitted, even in competition. And I think
you're right there. I think you're right about that. I mean, I've been watching him do jiu-jitsu for years. He always has that type of style that he has in MMA and jiu-jitsu. Very aggressive, puts all of his weight, and he's a very intense dude. And man, that was something. And he actually almost got submitted a few times. So, in fact, it was interesting because Hernandez had a couple opportunities when he had the guy hurt, and he was actually going for the. He was actually going for the submission a few times. It was pretty impressive. I think he wanted to make a statement, which I heard it loud and clear.
Yeah, he kept going for a guillotine. He kept going for that weird front one.
Yeah.
Let me link this to something we said about Gastelum, and then something Cormier also said. It was Cormier science, he called it in the prelims, but he goes, "Hey, he goes, air passes through fat. Everyone tells me I'm too fat, but I don't get tired like that." And then Gastelum obviously comes in a little bit thick, but has fought with a lot of heart and hasn't always looked tired. He just can't. So in Cormier science, I think in the Cormier science class, what happened to Vieira is obvious that was too much muscle, and I've never seen anyone drop off like that.
That was bad.
I've seen a lot of drop-offs too, obviously, with a lot of muscle. We've seen Overeem look tired suddenly. We've seen a lot of strong guys look like that. But he went for that sub at the very beginning. I thought it was over. I thought I was able to go get some chips or go grab another beer. I thought once he had his back at the beginning, I go, well, the guy was brought in to lose. Essentially, he's going to lose in the first minute. Somehow he gets out of it. And what happened? Was that what made his arms tired? Is that what fatigued him? Did he get caught? Because
there was a little bit of transition. I mean, I saw that as well. They brought in Anthony Hernandez to lose, but at least by submission, if not Vieira getting a TKO on the ground, maybe standing, and then they've got a multi-dimensional finisher who's scary and undefeated in the division. That was the idea. So what happens is he takes his back and he's working chokes, and then it transitioned into like the Russian armbar position where the guy's sneaking out the back and your stomach down going for the armbar, but he didn't. Yeah, but did not quite get to do that. And as soon as they stood up, you see that this guy just blew his entire wad doing jiu-jitsu technique. I mean, he's a black belt and a world champion. I don't understand why he was trying to he was trying to finesse it so hard. I mean,
yeah, and he took some shots when they stood up too. So,
but because he was tired.
Yeah, I mean, you see, like a lot of guys when they take big shots, they suddenly, people that you've always known as having like a lot of wind. They take those power shots and don't fall. You see that fatigue built in too. So I mean, I think it was exactly what you said, that he blew a lot of it and threw out his arms, and then took a few shots, and then he just faded.
How we talk about, yeah, you're right about that. You're 100% right. You know how we talk about how you give someone your best shot, they take it, and then you're like, I don't have a plan B. This was an example of that, but on the ground. This is a guy who had fallen in love, like a striker falls in love with his power. He'd fallen in love with his submission game. He went real hard at it, straight line to it, tried to force it, and not like it doesn't work. I mean, that works, and it's worked for him many times. But in MMA, it's just a little bit different. And because there are so many different aspects to the game, and as soon as the submissions didn't work, as soon as they stood up, they're 2 minutes in, and he's like, I can't breathe. I'm exhausted. I mean, you got to have a plan B, and it's a 15-minute fight. Take the time to use that and find the opening. Don't chase the submission is another.
I mean, obviously he made mistakes. I mean, to his defense, though, those subs look like they were there, and he was so much.
They did. They very much did.
So for a card that didn't really have big names, it was very top heavy. There were actually some fun fights to talk about. There's a couple more that we could talk about, but we're gonna call it here.
Okay.
Macy Barber. We may even do it on Wednesday. We'll pick it up at the back. We'll talk about Macy Barber and Julian Hernandez. Julian Marquez also had a very surprising sub. That would have been the surprising sub of the night if it wasn't for Hernandez here. So turned out to be a pretty fun card. We're getting some answers in the welterweight division, but there's this sort of weird logjam there which we'll get into. Coming up on Wednesday, we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Man, I am ready to talk about Adesanya and Blachowicz, man. But we got some good smaller cards still coming up. We have
who doesn't like Derek Lewis versus Curtis Blades? I mean, that's gonna be.
We have UFC Fight Night Rosenstruck versus Gane, which is going to be Curtis Blades versus Derek Lewis, which is going to be a great fight, especially for power versus wrestling.
Yeah,
that card has a bunch of interesting fights. This is sort of what I expected the undercard on the UFC 258 to look something like this, right? There's interesting fights, none of them worthy of pay-per-view. So we'll get into some of those. And then after that, we have what I just said was Rosenstruck versus Gane, another pretty good heavyweight fight. Most of that card hasn't been solidified, amazingly.
2 weeks out from it.
Yeah. But it looks like we got Alex Caceres. We got some good fights. You know who I want to talk about too, and we'll talk about some of these smaller fights on Wednesday. I think is I want to talk about Bilal Muhammad. We just don't have time.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah,
that was a good fight, and that's a guy that's not getting a lot of respect. And he probably should be 2 fights away. He's probably more like 3 or 4.
Yeah.
And then something I'm excited for is on March 6th is Jan Blachowicz for Israel Adesanya. I think both of those guys have great storylines. We'll probably be talking about that.
What an awesome fight that's going to be.
Yeah, and both of them have great storylines because Jan Blachowicz is, no matter how long he holds that belt, he's going to be people are just going to make him an underdog. I think it's going to be interesting how long it goes before he starts getting some respect. And 3 title fights there because every one of those title fights are interesting, even though Amanda Nunes is going to rock Megan Anderson like nothing, but it's still a good fight. So excited
Great
for
card.
the next pay-per-view too.
Yeah.
So when are you going to see us next, Afshin? We're going to do this again on Wednesday night, right?
Let's do Wednesday night, baby. Keep the train rolling Wednesdays and Sundays.
Well, so you say Wednesday because that's when we're going to do it. I'm trying to juggle a little bit how we're going to do. I think Wednesday, since it's so late, and hey, we're building the following still. We're just putting out videos right now. They're not getting watched a ton. So last Wednesday, what I did is we recorded it.
Yes.
and I put it Thursday morning.
Correct.
It'll probably be Thursday morning. These post-mortem fight things, the problem is it's great. It's on YouTube and it's live, but once we get off, it takes a while to pop back up. This may not even show up till tomorrow morning. It may, for searches. So we'll figure that out. We'll figure out how to do the lives. I think that the Wednesdays for sure it'll actually be Thursday morning. I think we'll record those for sure. And just to try to get those tags hitting and stuff. The postmortems we'll see, because sometimes they're going to be Monday MMA Church or Sunday MMA Church, and sometimes maybe we'll do it right after the press conference. We'll figure those out. Anyway, Afshin, final thoughts?
No, pretty good card last night. 10 fights, 1 knockout finish, 3 submissions. Very interesting. 6 decisions. Good card overall. Next week has a few more heavyweight fights. Heavyweights usually go to the finish. So looking forward to more finishes and more interesting developments in the UFC next week.
Okay. Thank you, Afshin.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
This is Chaotic Sports. Fist on Chin on the Chaotic Sports Network. Find us at Chaotic Sports. Find us at Fist on Chin for fight-specific stuff. And go look really closely there. Afshin put on his Twitter, AFMan, AFAmazing. I follow him, but he'll probably start getting a little bit more active there. We'll start playing with how to talk about fights and stuff on Twitter. So thank you guys very much, and we will see you next Thursday morning.
See ya. Thanks, Chris.